Well, hey there, and welcome to another happy hour alignment. Nope, I already messed that up. Alignment happy hour segment. I'm Nova Whiteman, your host. Remember, these segments are we call them happy hour because myself and each of my guests will bring on a fun little drink because that just is, sets the aesthetic and the ambiance and it's fun. But really, it's talking about conversations and points of this consciousness work, aspects of alignment, vibration, energy, conscious co-creation that help your life be happier, right? And help us all be a little bit happier. So today I have a wonderful, wonderful guest. Her name is Annie Kuensting. Did I pronounce that right?
No, it's Kuensting, but I mean, the U is silent, but it's not supposed to be silent. It wasn't silent, and then somebody decided that it was going to be pronounced silent, and so that's how I grew up with it. But I think it's supposed to be like Kuensting, like German. But
It's Kensting.
yeah,
Okay.
how would you know?
Well, here's the thing too. So Annie and I have known each other for years.
Yeah.
I worked with this son of a bitch for a long time, and I never knew her name. Her last name was pronounced that way, but everything's so informal. It's just, hey,
Yeah.
Annie, hey, Nova.
Yeah.
So she forgives me. It's cool. All right.
Yeah.
Annie Kuensting, MA, and the work she offers is best described as transformational. I can second that. Annie's expertise and process catalyzes deep and lasting change, honoring the true humanity of each individual present. She has an uncanny skill of unleashing our own inner power, inspiring to action in the direction of our dreams. Annie is also an expert in DEI and human transformation. Her diverse background in education laid a strong foundation for understanding the science and art of growth and development. Annie has spent over a decade teaching, leading, and transforming K through 12 schools and higher education institutions. She is a certified practitioner in diversity and inclusion from Cornell University, a qualified administrator of the Intercultural Developmental Inventory, IDI, and a successful personal and professional coach and consultant who is trained in the spiritual alignment process because I trained her. So I typically, these interviews or discussions are very informal, of course, and I typically don't read bios word for word like that, but yours has so many important aspects to highlight, and you're not only an accomplished person and impressive, but you are one of the most passionate people I know when it comes to transformation and actual change. Hence, why you found yourself in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion, among other things, and coaching and consulting in general. So, welcome to the space, Miss Annie
Thank
Kuensting.
you. Thank you so much, Nova. It's so wonderful to be here. I'm so excited to chat.
Yeah, me too. And I will say your last name at least 4 more times to get it in there.
Locked in.
Not going to embarrass myself again. For this segment of Alignment Happy Hour, Annie and I decided to talk about something that's really, really important in this journey of being a conscious human or a conscious spiritual being having a human experience, or really in this arena, we could say a conscious human experience, because we all know that we are not just human, that if you're watching this channel and subscribe to this line of thinking, that is, we all know that we're not just human, we're conscious. We're consciousness, I should say. We're spirit having a human experience, but that human experience so oftentimes is unconscious. And so we seek through this work, through alignment, through anything that falls under the umbrella of consciousness to, bring some light, shed some light on some of these subjects. And like in Annie's bio, the goal is always the same: to catalyze not only a great shift and a great change and transformation, but just to really a great remembrance, a remembrance of the truth of who you really are. And so many people in the spiritual arena or communities or consciousness communities, personal growth, personal development and transformation, it tends to be a thing, and everybody hears me talk or speak to this quite often, it tends to be a thing to just step over the whole human part. Where I know, and I know Annie subscribes to this as well, that actually, if you're seeking enlightenment, the way to get there is by embracing your humanity. If you're seeking higher levels of consciousness, the way to get there is to embrace yourself right where you're at. So that's one of the reasons why I knew Annie would be a great person to have on for this segment. And then our topic of choice is something that has really come into the space. I've been doing this work forever. I've been on a conscious path since I was a child. So I feel like I've seen it all, but I have never seen this aspect more rampant than it is now these days. And that is called spiritual bypassing. Spiritual mother freaking bypassing when you're on a conscious journey and you're really trying your best to practice what we're invited to practice through these techniques, through gratitude, through applying the law of attraction, positive thinking, all of that kind of stuff. And then what inevitably happens, and everybody comes across it. I can raise my hand. Annie, I know you can too. At certain parts in your journey, you catch yourself. Well, wait a minute. I don't actually feel good about this. What do I do when I'm trying to force myself to feel good in this space and I don't? Oh, I should actually face it, and I should actually not let that shit go.
What's your drink of choice today, Nova?
Yeah, it's hot tea. It's hot cinnamon tea, good earth, but I had to laugh. I was telling you before we hit the record button that out of all the cups that I grabbed today, it's this one. And that's a phrase that perfectly encompasses what we're talking about. Like, oh, just let that shit go.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, sometimes you can't, right? And sometimes you
Nor
shouldn't.
should you. Right,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, whether it's in the arena of just like, general positive thinking your way through your life, or in areas where you are an expert, Annie, like there's plenty of people who live in the world where they can't just let that shit go. And just, I would love to turn that over to you. Like your thoughts. First of all, tell us what you're drinking.
Mhm.
Forgot to mention that part.
Okay, so I have this beverage called Recess, and it is a mood enhancing magnesium and adaptogen infused sparkling water.
I want that.
I'll get you one. The
Okay.
the flavor is blood orange. It's quite delicious.
Amazing. Do you feel like a little bit? I know I've been drinking a magnesium powder supplement. Do you feel a little bit
I feel
like
it right away. Yeah, I feel it right away. Yeah.
amazing? So in your relaxed, calm state, speak to us about spiritual bypassing in the
Yeah.
context of DEI.
Sure. Well, I think to enter into the conversation about how do these two things intersect or complement or rely on each other, I think I should say what I, like you said, spirituality is really aligning with who you really are. Well, who are we really? Who are we really? Yes, we are like a spiritual, energetic being, but what's the quality of that beingness? And the quality of that beingness is love, and the more that we align with our true nature, the more we feel love present within us, the greater capacity we have to access it when we are out of alignment, right? But like in my own journey, it's felt like a transformation, like a melting into more and more love, right? For everyone and everything, and greater amounts of compassion and increased empathy, right?
Mhm.
And when we're thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're talking about transforming people's thoughts, which is part of the work, right? Like in alignment work, we know that we've adopted beliefs that no longer serve us, beliefs that were never ours to begin with, beliefs that could be like connected to our gender, right? Or our race, or any of these other identities that we have. But we've learned this shit and it doesn't fit us, nor does it suit us, nor is it really rooted in love, So DEI work is doing the work of looking at, what we would call bias, beliefs that we have, ways of being, that like the norms of our culture, how we, relate with one another. And we get curious about who are we really being in this process? How are we showing up? What are the stories that we're attaching to various people based upon the identities that we have, ascribed to them, which is how we make sense of the world, right? But in the human world that we have today, we've learned false beliefs, we've learned false stories, stereotypes run rampant, where our society is created in a way, that has just created stories that aren't true, both about ourselves and about other people. And so to me, true DEI work is getting to the root beliefs that we have, and really looking at the ways how we show up in particular to people who are different from us. In what ways does my heart close when I'm in conversation with somebody who is very different from me? How much do I hold them, to their highest and good, see them, as these wonderful, full, complete beings that are here to bring diversity and to help me grow, or how often do I look at other people and think that I'm better than, or, inherently pass any kind of judgment, right? That creates disconnection and really is rooted in hierarchy, right? Because that's what we do. We make judgments and we say, this is good or bad, this person's right or wrong. And that limits our capacity to connect with people on a soul level. And it limits us from being a true full expression of who we are, because in our most authentic nature, that isn't how we function, that isn't how we interact with each other. And so to me, they're so very much one and the same, like you can't really have one without the other, when we're talking about ourselves as individuals, and then when I think about, yes, we practice alignment to feel good. Yes, here for it, but why? What's the deeper why for that? And I believe it's that so that we can, like you said, change the world, show up and be the change in the world, right? So my alignment practice is for me to come to fully understand that I am responsible for my happiness, no matter how I may not want to believe that, right? Take full ownership for how I feel. And then to say, if we're here to be these agents of light and love, then how can I go into my world, my community, my world, and be a demonstration of that, So it is seeing alignment as the tool for us personally, and then the bedrock that we need in order to face a polarized, hostile, all over the map world. We have to have the emotional skills and tools to navigate that rugged terrain, and when we're talking about, let's say, unrelated to DEI, let's say we have a pattern in our family where somebody treats us like shit. They believe, at some point we adopted a set of beliefs that said that, you can project your emotional pain onto me and I'll take it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're addressing that, that's a difficult conversation to have. That's a difficult pattern to break. It's hard to take a stand for yourself and to say no more, and to have a conversation with that person, if it requires that, to say, you don't get to do this to me anymore. And so to truly create change in the world, we have to be empowered. We have to have a sense of who we are, a sense of our worthiness, our deservedness to be here, and in order to have these hard, uncomfortable conversations, right? And so alignment leads into empowerment leads into taking action in the world, right? And so with DEI, we look particularly at how we treat one another, and the beliefs that we have and the ways of being that we have, the assumptions that we make, the story attached to whatever it is that, hold people back and hold them down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. So much to unpack with what you just said, but let's start with the whole area of when we're looking at our own biases, right? Because all these contexts that we find to be uncomfortable, those are usually the contexts that we tend to see the spiritual bypassing happen, because it's uncomfortable. We don't want to go there. We don't like to feel uncomfortable. And yet, if we're really talking about change that comes by being empowered and aligned, we have to face that discomfort. So I'm curious, what are some of the biggest examples that you have seen or experienced or observed, of spiritual bypassing in today's world? And before you answer that, I'm just going to highlight that like we are on the leading edge of thought and creation right now. We, as much bullshit as there is in the world and atrocities and horrors, there is every bit as much light and love and growth and expansion. And I think we just tend to focus on one more than the other because it needs our attention. We have to do something about it, right? But we can't dismiss the good stuff. So we've got like consciousness is raising, which is great. You've got people waking up. You've got people understanding that they have a responsibility, spiritual, conscious responsibility to the world. And at the same time, we've got more polarization and separation than we've perhaps either ever seen or been aware of. So to me, that's very fertile territory for a lot of spiritual bypassing to occur. What have you seen? What do you observe?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like you're saying, we want to deny, so what are the habits in which we kind of put the blinders up? First of all, we can get into this place of like, because I'm spiritual, I'm above whatever is happening in humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's not my job to even pay attention to. I'm not even going to look at it, right? Because that would be giving attention to something that I want more of, and we can't do that, right? Instead of thinking about the reasons why we're looking at what we're looking at. Are we looking at what we're looking at in order to continue judgment, to get lost in the suffering of it, or to be able to hold it with curiosity and wonder and say, what's the fuller picture here? What can we do so that this doesn't continue to happen? So we look at things knowing that when we add light to the darkness, things transmute, but we have to be willing to look at them. Now, like you're saying, does this mean we get lost in all of the shit? No, we can't, but we have to at least be willing to acknowledge that, there are things that need our attention. In this world, people are not being treated fairly, and we're not being the truest, most authentic versions of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we should take a look, so, yeah, being above it, denying that it really is, or, offering a justification that says, oh, that's not why that is, right? It's because of this person's, these are the lessons they had to learn in life, or this is their karma, or whatever way that we can justify what's happening in order to not have any kind of interconnected responsibility to one another.
Mm-hmm.
I see that. I see, just this belief that like, because I'm a spiritual being, I don't harbor any bias. I don't have any kind of learned stereotypes that could cause harm, because I am a light worker. And yet when we see, a single mother with 5 kids who needs our help, right? What's our response? Do we, what's the story that we attach? So those are common. Those are problematic. There's a lot of like blaming people instead of putting the responsibility on systems that are really responsible for so much of the oppression that we see, saying, well, if those people just ate better, or if those people did this, or if those people did that, personal blame, which is so judgmental and so wrong, and it lacks all empathy and compassion, so I think there's just, there's just this unwillingness to step into a deeper truth about what is, and to get curious about why things are the way they are, and not just to say it's not my problem, or I'm above it, or, well, I'm high vibe, so I'm not gonna pay attention to anything that is, below my vibe, because
Yes.
that's gonna take me down.
That's one of my other, along with this, let that shit go, which to be clear, there are, if you can let it go and pivot, I've spoken to this before, please do so. That's great. If you can't, it's because there's something that needs your attention and you need to unpack it, process it, such as trauma, like there are things that you can't just let go. But another example of that is high vibes only. You see so much merchandise right now with that shit. high vibes only. Like, A, that's not even possible, kids. We live in the world of the relative where there's up and down, yin and yang, left and right, good and bad. Like, you can't not have any other additional vibes. And even if you're somebody who manages to block out everything and adopt that storyline or approach that you just named of like, nope, I'm not going to give anything bad my attention because that's only going to grow it and expand it. Well, you are a spiritual being having a human experience, which means that in any given day, you're going to experience a plethora of emotions based on a plethora of thoughts, most of which are subconscious and therefore not under your control. So, in other words, don't fight it. How about strive for positive vibes or higher vibes, but work with those lower vibes? I think what we're after here is the fullness of the human experience, consciousness, spirituality, all of that. It's leading us, it's a doorway, an access point to the fullness, the totality of who we really are. And in terms of those points of discomfort that people want to or unconsciously spiritually bypass their way through, when you do approach it from curiosity and wonder, like you said, which I love, because that like neutralizes that energy, right? It gives you an opening. It's not this pressure filled, like, oh, I must, it's either this or it's that. I must figure this out or know exactly how to handle this situation or do it the right way. It's, get curious about it. That's like opening the doorway. But then you insert, this is where Conversations with God material is super helpful. You insert this all-encompassing question that will always lead you towards the fullness and totality of who you really are, and open your eyes to who the fullness of who we all really are is. Who am I in regards to that? Or who do I want to be? How do I want to show up in this context? So in a context of discomfort where you're staring the single mom with five kids, she can't feed, who needs our help? And you want to say, oh, well, that's just her soul's path. Like, you're answering that question. And it's not to say that you bend over backwards and you give her everything and now you no longer have anything. I feel like people go to these extremes. It's instead, again, from curiosity and wonder, gosh, what is there for me to understand about this situation, and who do I want to be here? What is one thing I can do here? And you start
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, you start there, and it's about a commitment to love everyone we come across and to identify what is their pain, what is their suffering, and can I offer any kind of a solution? Can I be of any service to that? And when we look at it like that, it's less about who's right and wrong, and it's more of like what you're saying, which is I get to choose to be a loving presence. I get to choose to show up and respond to this person in a way that if I was in a place of pain and suffering, I would want someone to respond to me like, we all have that power. And, and when we're talking about taking action, it can feel totally overwhelming. And it can be like, where do I even start? And what do I even do? And oh my God, and in the after, since 2020, there's been so many conversations that I think that have been very harmful in the DEI space, where we're throwing around terms and we're saying everybody is this or everybody is that, that makes even a willingness to talk about this scary. And it shuts a lot of people down, And so it's like we have to remember that, our beliefs, our behaviors are not our beingness. Even our beliefs are not who we really are. And kind of grace with that and relax and say, what is unlearn, and then to let how we choose to better the world align with who we are. What are our own personal passions? What do we care really about? What is one way that we have experienced suffering, and how would we like to help other people, experience less of that? And to figure out what it is. We don't have to do it all, and we don't have to know about all of the different aspects in order to be doing the work, right? We have to know what is calling on our heart, what impacts our life, what we're passionate about. There's mistreatment of people, of animals, and the planet everywhere. There's a plethora of places to jump in and say, I'm passionate about the environment. And so every month I'm going to show up and do this for the environment, right? So for me, it's like, as we learn with alignment practices, you have to think about the long term. You have to stay rooted in consistency. You have to say, I'm going to make a commitment to this. I care about this, not because it's trendy, not because I feel guilty, not because I think I should, but because I care about this. This matters to me. And because of that, I want to help, so it comes from a deeper place, and then we can stick with it. Then we can stick with it for the long haul because it's so deeply connected to who we are.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And in essence, you just demonstrated what answering that question looks like. Who do I want to be here in regards to this? Well, I care. I want to be somebody who cares about this, who's committed to it. And that consistency piece and the approach of anything really, but especially in this context of the long haul, it's a lifelong process. I mean, you're trained in all of this stuff, and I'm sure you don't feel anywhere near the level of, what's out there. And me, tremendously less so without that training. But it's a process, and we work with what's in the space, and you show up and you stay committed and you don't turn away for fear of, that's the thing that's going to attract more. Let me, spoiler alert, guys, it's not.
No, or even the fear of making a mistake. I think a lot of people want to do
Yeah.
help and do good in the world, and they're afraid they're going to make a mistake. They're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. They're afraid they're going to offend somebody. So what do? We keep our noses in the books. We try to learn all of the things so that we can show up and be the perfect human. It ain't going to happen.
No,
It's not going to happen. And what I would say is, do your own inner work as a conscious human being. Show up and be reflective and get curious and wonder why you got triggered, and pay attention to when your heart closes, and do all of that, but don't wait. Like you're saying, you can't reach a point that you say, okay, now I'm ready to take action. Now I'm ready to go and volunteer at that place. Or now I'm ready to, contact that nonprofit and say, hey, I'd like to come in and volunteer, whatever it is. It's like direct action, and let it be messy. And you're going to make mistakes. And I have been studying, history and DEI related topics for over 20 years, and I have made massive blunders along the way, saying really offensive things to people, behaving in a way that was really like power hoarding and gross, and I learned lessons, really powerful lessons at those times, and I had people tell me that's not okay to say. You can't do that, and alignment work asks us to learn how to forgive ourselves, how to be with those times when we're like, oof, I reacted, I snapped, or I did this. And we have to learn how to hold ourselves, to move through those so that we don't get lost in the self-attack and blame and, inner critic going wild and all of that stuff, and that's a core component of doing work in the world, any kind of social justice oriented work, because it's part of the journey. And I wish people, I feel sad, I guess is the best word, that so many people are afraid to step in or to say something because of the outlash, that they're going to receive if they say or do the wrong thing. And that breaks my heart, because we have a bunch of eager people who truly care, who really want to do the right thing, but are afraid, because of, we know what can happen, we've seen it. So yeah, it's like how to nurse yourself back to wholeness, because it's part of how we grow.
Right. And it's the recovery piece too. And I talk about this a lot just in general terms of alignment is, of course, the goal isn't to be in alignment 100% of the time. It's to know how to get into alignment with who you really are, stay there more often, and know what to do when you inevitably fall out because you're human. And it's that recovery process that is the most vital piece, because you will fall out. You will be messy. You will get it wrong. You will experience contrast. That is the deal. That is what we signed up for. And so I think that it takes a willingness to just accept, decide ahead of time. I care about this so much that I'm going to do it anyway. messy, knowing that I'm going to screw up. And when I do, here's how I'm going to handle that. And you can do that in any context. You can do that in the context of building a business, of starting a relationship, of anything that is goal oriented or that you care about. Like, just kind of make space for that messiness and that the human bits. It's kind of along the lines of feel the fear and do it anyway. Take the fear with you. It's
Yeah.
going to be your companion anyway. And I find that it's really helpful that when you do that, like, okay, I'm going to get it messy, because I know exactly what you're talking about during the heightened climax of all of these issues. George Floyd, everybody, add in social media, and you've got everybody, all of a sudden so brave and brazen to call each other out. And what you tend to see is people like, well, I care about this. And then somebody comes in and says, yeah, but what about abortion? Well, what do you mean? Like, and then people will back down because they're brave enough to make a statement, but then somebody points out another injustice in the world or opinion or something that needs this or that attention. And then that person shrinks when they were just trying to do good in this space. And so I think the willingness to know, like, just let people have their experience of you, know that that's going to be part of the territory. Be willing to be messy, to mess up, to make mistakes and learn from them. And then find your access point. And what I mean by that is what is within reach, because we can't solve all the world's problems overnight. We can't fix broken systems that have been, running the show for centuries, essentially. So what is within reach is those little bits, those small acts by many consistently that create that huge change and fix broken systems, create new ones, etc. So if you can just kind of like, and it's not an easy thing, you're going to fall, you're going to forget, you're going to have to soothe yourself back into that space. But what is one small thing I can do right now? Okay, maybe I can't go on that march, that human rights march, because that's just, I can't do it for whatever reason. Not going to beat myself up about it. I'll make a donation. I'll drop off a case of water to the volunteers. Like, what one little thing can you do? And by that action, it's a loving act of compassion and kindness towards an issue that, yeah, you're looking at. Yes, it's uncomfortable. No, you're not adding to or perpetuating the problem with your attention, like a lot of people tend to think or be afraid of. You're healing it.
Mhm.
You're participating in oneness. You're participating in interconnectivity. And there's no small action that's so small that it won't make a big difference. It'll create a huge difference. But find your access point and be willing to be messy, I think, are two really important approaches here.
Yeah. I mean, I just had a conversation with a friend who's a lawyer, and she's like ready. She's like, I want to take action. I want to show up, and, that's what she does for a living. And she's trying to figure out, well, where can I go do the work that I want to do? Like, what do I even want to do? Like, how do I do this? And there was some stuff going on with the school board at her daughter's school, like sketchy things were happening, and equities were kind of being talked about. And I was like, well, there you go. You're a lawyer, volunteer your services, volunteer to help, right? Like, you're passionate about this. You want equitable schools. You have the skill set, to do this naturally. There's nothing more you have to learn, right? All you have to do is say, hey, I'd like to volunteer my time. And it was like, it like blew her away, because it was like, it gets to be that simple. Like, yes, it gets to be that simple. If you're passionate about, acting, let's say, you could go and volunteer in a school and work with students who come from underserved population. Like, there's like, you could do that twice a month. I mean, there's so many ways to take who we are and what we love and what matters to us, and to give in a way that feels good, because we don't want you going to the march if you don't want to be at the march. If that creates fear, if when you're there, you're going to be anxious and you're not going to feel good. And then that's not for you. But then what is for you?
Yes.
And let that be okay. And again, it's like, yes, do we want to show up when there is, an unfortunate tragedy, and we're marching and we need this? Yes. And we need it consistently all throughout the year. We don't want to wait for the murder of George Floyd to be activated. We want to know that We've all learned things that are untrue. We all have bias. We all have privilege and power that we can, misuse and we can use for good. But it's not until we become really aware of how we fit into this complex system that we can start to move differently. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said earlier on in the conversation about, you mentioned something about like, if something triggers you about something that unfolded or some big issue, then get curious about it and identify like, why did that trigger me? Why do I feel this way? And I feel like that's a really great starting point for a lot of people in terms of, well, for everybody in terms of any issue around the world that you want to look at, but also in general in everyday life. Like, don't be afraid of the contrast, don't be afraid of the discomfort. So much is unknown in our world that, of course anybody's going to understand that we want to back away from it and run the other direction, but when you lean into it, you're opening yourself up to that fullness within yourself, that deeper level of compassion, empathy, and understanding. And it is my opinion that if we can nurture that, we will be able to relate to and with one another in such a way that is built on foundations of, or can help us build foundations of inclusivity and oneness and unity and equity and fairness. But if we're not willing to look there ourselves, that's going to be damn near impossible. So
Yes.
yeah, so I mean, and take this out of those social constructs and look at just the general concept of spiritual bypassing. I think about the earlier days of when that concept, or that just became a phrase, on the heels of law of attraction and positive thought movement. And, I knew people and had clients even that were very much like not willing to go into the shadow and just, Nova, can't you just give me a technique and get my vibration up and I can, sure, you're going to come crashing down. Don't you want to know what to do there? Or, what about this where it's not calling for your positivity, it's calling for your awareness, it's calling for your healing, your transformation. Um, so in that arena, we've got approach our triggers, right, with curiosity and wonder. But also when you notice people around you spiritually bypassing in any context, one thing that I find to be helpful is just to acknowledge them for where they're at and not move into judgment and condemnation there either, nor seek to change because everybody's on their own journey. I'm not going to jump in their face and be like, actually, let me show you this way. But to have more conscious conversations, to speak like we're having right now, to be willing to look at your own and be transparent about it, like you just told us about some of those learning experiences that you had. I think that's super, super important. Can you think
Yeah.
of anything else that you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think meeting people where they're at, with an understanding, without judgment, right? Because the practice of judgment has to go away. So whether I'm judging somebody, which I did earlier on in my career around DEI, I was cutthroat. I had no room for grace. It was like, how can you not know this? And why do you not care? And it, justified anger, justified frustration when people are dying and being hurt. Like, it made sense. And it wasn't super conducive for like making progress forward as a group,
Right, that little
So
detail.
yeah, it's that small, minor little detail. So
Mm.
it's like, when we can tap into that, when I think about how much time and energy and money I've spent learning about all of this stuff, unpacking all of my own shit. Like I said, 2 decades worth. Like my undergrad was in urban education. Even before that, I was reading books about like, illuminating all of this stuff to me, right? And so it's like we have to meet people where they are. We have to wonder about, what must they have been taught, or if it is that scary for them to open up to a different story or a different perspective, how much fear must they be living with themselves. So we can do that for the people who, let's say, we're out here, we're doing the work, and when we see somebody who's like way behind, we have to practice that. And then when we see people who we judge, in terms of where do we limit our capacity to look at situations, social justice situations, and wonder about the stories that we missed or the lack of perspective that we have about humanity to understand why people do what they do. So we can judge, like when the riots happened, they were just a few blocks from my house, and there was all kinds of conversations about that, and I remember having one with a close, dear friend, and I said, well, imagine how you would feel if your community had been experiencing this kind of abuse and oppression, neglect, dehumanization for as long as, African Americans have. How would you feel? And what would you do? Like if somebody did that to my brother, you better believe I would be willing to burn some shit to the ground, like that's because that's who we are as people. We care fiercely about one another. So yes, we can't pull people along, nor can we slam info into people's faces and say, you're wrong and how you're racist and how dare you, you don't care. We have to find a gentle way to open their heart, and I've always found like put yourself in their shoes is one of the best ways to open our heart ourselves when we notice that we're closing down, and to share that with people who you come across who are resistant, and who are unwilling to understand. You bypass the head. You can't get into an argument. You can't get caught up in the right and wrong. It just opens their heart. And then you can say, okay, have a wonderful day.
Oh, I love that. And you may not have like fixed it in one little conversation where everybody's in agreement, but you planted a seed, a big old seed. Wow, yeah, I love that. Well, I'm mindful of our time here, and we could clearly go on forever, as I tend to do. But and with this particular conversation, there's just so much more. Now, I am aware though that you do this. You go into organizations, you go into places, and you facilitate conversations, you give speeches, or you do speaking around all of this, which you're clearly not only passionate about and well versed in, but you are able to convey this in that way where it is inviting versus putting people on the defensive or shutting them down. You provide people access points. So tell us a little bit more about that and how they can reach you if they want to take advantage of your services.
Yes. So my website is www.beaconempowerment.net. And there you'll see, all of my DEI related offerings. I'm currently working with companies offering a talk, and it's called Be the Change: How Personal Empowerment Inspires Thriving Cultures in a Dynamic and Diverse World. So it's essentially a lot of like what we talked about, but I'm looking to partner with people and organizations, small businesses, neighborhood groups, whoever, right? Who they're like, I want to talk, and I want to ask questions, and I want to learn how to do better and how to love myself and others through this process. So, that's really, I love to talk, just like Nova. So we have that in common. So yeah, so if people are curious and interested in having that talk, they can email me. My email is Annie@beaconempowerment.net. And then I also offer, leadership coaching for leadership teams who want to do like more formal, structured DEI work, which would incorporate the IDI inventory that you mentioned, that assessment that I give, and it's more structured around, business protocols, policies, things like that, so it's personal. I've got the personal and the professional wing, but yeah, so that would be ways, and how people can get in touch.
Awesome. And I will include that information in the show notes. So if you're watching this, look in the show notes. And if you're receiving this through my email list, I'll have Annie's information there. And consider that, when we're approaching this, how do I be the change I wish to see in the world? And looking for your access points. Well, if it's not this, what is it? This could be an easy one. Who do you know? What organizations are you aware of? Or people that you could connect Annie with? Because I'll tell you what, she's out there doing this work that she was born to do. Like you were just born to be an advocate in this way. And I appreciate that so much because, that isn't my realm, right? I have a different realm. So in that way of each of us wanting to like, okay, I'm not going to do anything because I feel like it's too much. I can't, do what you can. Do what you can. And there will always be people who are just direct front and center. Help them, support them. So Annie could be your access point and the world will thank you for it. So make sure to check that out. But I thought this was a wonderful discussion. I'd love to have you back on so we can dig a little bit deeper here, and bring us all to a greater point of consciousness and connection and alignment so that we can start to fix some of these broke ass systems more and build new ones that are in alignment with who we all really are and what everyone deserves as a collective.
Yes. Thank you so much, Nova. This is
Yeah.
wonderful. I had such a
Oh,
great.
good, good. Me too. And for those of you who want more alignment, clearly there are a ton of videos on this channel. If you haven't taken my free mini e-course, 3 days to raise your vibration, please do so. Sign up at novawhiteman.com, and that's going to teach you the recovery, right? Raise your vibration. Cool. What do you do when you fall out, and how do you get back in? It's all there. So until next time, thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Let me try to stop this recording.